The world of Vigilus was never a verdant place. Arid plains dominated the entire globe, broken up only by the hive sprawls, continents in their own right, and the polar region of Calyx Bane, an inhospitable, monster-infested no-man's land. Water was scarce on Vigilus, and the poorest suffered for it. What they did have was delivered to them thanks only to the genius of the resident archmagus of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Nessium Caldrike. He was the keeper of the most vital source of life-preserving technology on Vigilus, an impossibly tall tower which reached beyond the stratosphere. This was the Greater Omniscient Hoist, a technological marvel which collected the moisture from orbiting meteors and siphoned it planetside. The water was then stored in vast underground dams across the planet, guarded by large numbers of vigilant militia forces. Upon the arrival of the Orcs and the subsequent rise of the Pauper Prince's Genestealer cult, the hydration crisis on Vigilus soon worsened. The initial rampages of the Orcs saw transportation of resources between the hives cease almost entirely. The Genestealer cults, meanwhile, specifically targeted the dams of Vigilus. Having planned their day of ascension for centuries, the Pauper Princes knew exactly how to infiltrate the water containment centers and how to kill any resistance before it had a chance to coordinate an effective defense. Almost half of the planet's stored water fell into the hands of the princes within the first few weeks of the conflict. However, rather than keeping it for themselves, the princes instead muddied it with their own genetic taint and did all they could to keep the water flowing into the hives. Even the Greater Omniscient Hoist could not be spared from the insidious schemes of the Pauper Princes, who invaded the tower from the gutters below and fought an ascending battle against the Scitarii of the Mechanicum. Despite the Archmagus's greatest calculative efforts to maximize the effectiveness of his warriors of metal and flesh, the bottom half of the tower was lost, the upper half remaining Xenos-free only because of the Onager dune crawlers, squadrons, that endlessly prowled the outside of the hoist, the barrels of their neutron laser cannons probing through windows and portholes, ready to put down any skittering signs of life. With hysteria threatening to break the populace at any moment, the time was ripe for a savior, for it was not only the Genestealer cults who had been scheming beyond sight for so many years. Another, perhaps even more sinister enemy of the Imperium had been present on the world for several years in advance of the coming of the Orcs. Mortarion, Primarch of the Death Guard Legion and Demon Prince of Nurgle, had seen the value of Vigilus even before his forces had brought their assault to Ultramar after the birth of the Great Rift. He had come to realize that if Vigilus should fall to his forces, then he could transform it into a staging post from which to develop and launch a plague invasion. Its central position between the Imperium Sanctus and Nihilus meant that he could infect the frontier worlds on either side of the Nachmund Gauntlet. Subsequent invasions of his Death Guard Legion would be swift if the populations of those worlds had already succumbed to the gifts of his patron god. Mortarion was preparing to lead his forces against the Lord Commander of the Imperium, Rabute Gilliman, and so could not invade Vigilus himself. So, he decided to send a cabal of his most adept plague manufacturers in his stead. Their mission? To infect Vigilus with a special kind of plague, powerful enough to engulf the world and bring it into the filth-slick clutches of Grandfather Nurgle. Lord of Contagion Phaelus Siphon and Plaguecaster Lucius Parasus led the circle of Plague Makers, as well as a secret contingent of Death Guard Plague Marines, to Vigilus, aboard a captured Imperial trading vessel. Arriving at the docks of Hivesprawl Dontoria, Lord Siphon commanded their vessel to be crashed into the heart of the dock network. The trader smashed through platforms and smaller vessels and bit so deep into the concrete earth that the Death Guard were able to tunnel their way out of the wreckage and into the sewer systems of the sprawl itself. From there, the Lord of Contagion dispersed the plague manufacturers across Vigilus and charged them with brewing the plague and polluting the populace. The sickness had already been chosen, the rites performed aboard the trader, Nurgle was with them and had blessed them with the power of creation. The Gellerpox, a highly infectious contagion with the power to fuse flesh and metal, would be the means by which Mortarian's plans would be fulfilled. 7 years later, word spread amongst the inhabitants of the major hive sprawls that deep in the sewers were beings blessed with ancient wisdom and an elixir to keep their thirst at bay. Despite the outlandish nature of the rumour, desperate people who had lost their faith in their imperial protectors heeded the call in their droves. Yet what they discovered deep in the dark was a salvation unlike anything they could have dreamed in their most demented nightmares. Power-armoured hands encrusted with millennia's worth of filth grasped them under green lumens, their tentacles wrapping about their necks, choking them, only letting go when the thick, mucus-layered concoction was forced down their red raw throats. Then, as the change began to take place, when life was born in the birth canals beneath civilization, the new mutants were released upon the surface world. Any metal they touched became one with them instantly. Pipes and grates stuck to their wasting flesh and were absorbed by bulbous pus sacs that had already started to form all over. Sanity was replaced by a rapacious desire to infect, and so the will of the Primarch and Nurgle were made manifest.